And that is this wonderful backlit, slit, overexposed neon animation idea that Lisberger Studios had done originally, I think, for a commercial on television for a radio station.
We did it ourselves and spent too much money, and then we had to find a way to credit.
Okay, did everybody hear that? They spent too much money.
They spent too much. Yeah, so they used it for this. They used it for this commercial, and then I think you used it as the logo in Animal Olympics, right?
Our plan was to do a whole series of logo commercials for radio stations to try to finance this elaborate hobby.
Yeah. So this thing
finance a hobby. You know, that's interesting comment. Finance a hobby. By the way, Stephen, did you build Disney for all that? No. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
so
Alan.
just to finish off here, so I thought that whole visual concept would be a fantastic way of representing some of the abstractions inside of a computer, and it's not too late to take a shot at it still. This is a visual concept that was way ahead of its time. And then one of the other things that I thought was particularly good from the early days of thinking about TRON was the interactions between this weird new life form that the computer scientist Alan had created to find out what was going wrong with the master control program. And Bonnie wrote a scene in one of the original scripts where this video game warrior, which you can think of as kind of a personification of a search engine, but with intelligence, had found some humorous material on this vast cybernetic store and did not understand about humor. So there's this very touching scene between Tron and Tron's creator, Alan, where Alan tries to explain to Tron what a joke is and get Tron to see the point. And maybe in a future Tron movie we can see that scene finally come to life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Alan. To put in numbers for where the character would be and where the camera would be. So they would input X, Y, and Z as numbers. That was what they did. And these days we sometimes don't understand that it's okay to be an artist and a techie. Here's Bill Troyer and Jerry Rees.
It's Computer Image Choreographers. That's the title. So 1977, we were both in the Disney animation program, and
right.
we were in the situation where it was like Walt had just died. Nothing had changed. We were drawing on paper. It was like the old days.
Fighting over which pencil to use and how the texture was on the paper.
And actually having to turn in stubs to get new pencils.
That's right.
And Lisberger comes to town, and he comes in and he does this big pitch. He says, "We're gonna do something new. I got this new studio, and you gotta come out and do it. And who's with me?" And it was like that scene in Jerry Maguire, you know, where the one girl stands up. "I'll go with you." So, well, that was me. I stood up and I said, "I'll go." And I was the only one that went. So we go off. We do Animal Olympics. We develop TRON. We come back to Disney, and now we have this new project that's really exciting, and we say, we got this really cool thing, we're gonna do computers. Who'll join us? The only guy. This is the guy.
The traitor. You know, everybody was talking about performance in animation. Everybody was into the old Disney traditions, and I was too, but I realized that the main tradition was storytelling and performance, and we could realize new tools to help us do that. So I was brave and went upstairs, and I was hoping to meet Mobius. It was a real...
And you did?
Well, not only did I meet him, but I met him, and then I asked where my desk was, and it was his desk. They just pulled a chair up to the opposite side of his desk, and then I was terrified because I had to draw on the same desk surface as Mobius. So I was trying to hide my drawings while I was working. But he was incredibly gracious, and we learned a lot. And do you remember about the, Battle Zone video game that we had on the set?
Oh yeah, everybody got good at that, yeah.
Except Jeff always beat us.
Right, well, that's true. You know, the thing about TRON that was great was because we had trained on paper where you had to really, you know, nobody just sat down and started animating. It was too much work. You really had to think about it. And because you had to draw every frame, you kind of had to know what you were doing before you started. If we had not had that skill, we never could have made TRON. Because in those days, you couldn't see anything move on a computer. You had to literally just first imagine in your head, do a picture of it, and then from that picture, you had to figure out, okay, it's X feet tall, it's going to move three feet per frame.
Right.
And you literally did graphs, and we drew it all out and then had to hand write it.
Well, it was really interesting because to us, it translated directly from doing storyboarding for traditional animation. Everybody calls it animatic now. But, you know, we were used to posing out the main things that would happen within a scene. But then we had to think about, okay, how do you communicate with the guy who's sitting at a keyboard? No mouse even. So I took a lot of reading. So we set up the storyboards, set up all the graphs for speed and dimension and sets and everything, and then sit there for 45 minutes while they bring up one frame. And then go, no, move the camera back, a little more long lens effect, please, thank you, and then read a couple more chapters in the book while they type some more, and the next image came up. But before we went out to meet with Magi and Triple I, what's that? Okay, sorry. But yeah, before we went out, there was a lot of storyboard planning, and some of that, I'm sure you and I both have posted some of it.
Well, it was a handmade film because you take it for granted now, you have animation software and everybody can sit down at their laptop and make something move, but in those days, the only software that was written was to build some models and to color some models and to light some models. Nobody had ever written anything to move the models.
Right.
So when you watch TRON tonight, every one of those light cycles, recognizers, the solar sailor, all that's happening is we rendered the solar sailor here on frame 1 and here on frame 2 and here on frame 3. And that's how everything moved. And it was all handwritten on exposure sheets and typed in. But one of the guys that typed it in ended up having a good career. A guy named Chris Wedge at Magi ended up going on to direct Ice Age, and so that.
Well, you know, something else that was pretty cool is one of the other animators that was brave enough to come peek into our trailer was John Lasseter. John Lasseter. He was one of the guys that was curious enough to come take a look at what we were up to.
Yeah, he always says that was the thing that gave him the idea to get into computer animation. So
right.
I guess we had some effect there.
Right.
So, anyway, great to see you all. That was fun.
But that's what I had to use. So I had to meet with the band. I think we met at Bud Friedman's Improv one afternoon. And I said to them, you know, you're not really my choice for this, because I'm not very diplomatic, right? And I said, you know, I don't want a power pop ballad. I really wanted the Police. Now, I'm not asking you to be the Police, but I want a song that's punky, that has an attitude, you know, where you're not going off into space about some love song thing. I want something hard. And they came back with the song Only Solutions, which I'm sure some of you know. I think it's an incredibly good song, and they actually came back sounding like the Police. I mean, the drummer sounds like Stuart Copeland, and Steve Perry, you know, sounds like Sting, and I think they did a fantastic job. It wasn't really what I was asking necessarily for them to do, but they did sound like the Police. So next time you listen to that song, think of the Police. And I've got lots more stories, but if you come up to me, I'll tell them to you. But Frank, why don't you tell them about some of the crazy things we did with the sound effects? Which didn't exist in the real world. There were no sound effects we could get stock sound effects from and stick them in this movie. Everything had to be created from scratch.
Well, you were so brave because we were kind of the first baby boomers to kind of penetrate the Disney lot. So we had long hair, we wore shorts, a lot of things that had never been done at Disney before. But we
don't talk about it.
And Michael was living on the west side, and so was I. So was Steve. So we all got together and basically brought the film to Lionsgate Films to do the mix. I remember Michael was saying, if you want a silent film, we'll do it at Disney.
Well, Well, at the time, in all fairness, at the time, the dubbers on that stage were real-time dubbers. So if you had to go back 10 minutes to do something, you had to wait 10 minutes for the film to rewind, and we did not quite have that kind of time.
So on a daily basis, we would go out. We were on the film for about a year. We got to fly up in the Goodyear blimp and drop mics off the side of it and fly over Long Beach.
We took mics and put them in my Saab Sonnet, drove around Mulholland Drive to get sounds to use for the light cycles. Did we ever use?
We packed sound equipment on the backs of motorcycle racers and had them blaze through Malibu at 150 miles an hour.
That's the fun part of the job.
We got to go record all of Nikola Tesla's inventions, all of his Tesla coils.
And we had all the original Frankenstein props from the original 1930, whatever it was, Frankenstein movie, that all worked. Those were all actual working coils that made sizzling sounds.
Things that you could not do today. You know, post 9/11, we got to go to Jet Propulsion Laboratories and actually crawl under the equipment and tie the audio cables in directly to the audio lines. And at the time, something was going across the universe, but we got all this great stuff, and it was just fun. And also we got to go up to Cupertino and work with Apple. It was like the first, we were using the Apple IIe.
Yes, I remember going up there and the guy said, you know, in a couple of years, everybody's gonna have a personal computer in their house. And I said, are you crazy? And that's why to this day I've spent the last 30 years trying to save vinyl, which I have, and it's still the best way to listen to music as far as I'm concerned. Okay, well, they want to see the movie.
We have to, I don't know, there's a curfew or something.
Okay, fine. At least we got here this time, you know, so we're happy to be here. So
thank you, guys.
Very much.
Thank you. Great story. Very nice. All right, we're to the part which is very special. A man who showed up. He's sick as a dog, so don't get too distracted.
Thank you, Harrison. Hello, hello. I have a cough drop in my mouth if you hear some special sounds there. Anyway, I'm just trying to get through a conversation. I just got off of a plane 2 days ago from Auckland, New Zealand, and Melbourne, Australia, which TRON lives there too. It's amazing. It's amazing, the worldwide appeal of this film. But someone left me a little gift on the airplane. After 15 hours of flight, I am now carrying it around. Anyway, I'm not going to be very long here. I'm always talking about TRON. These wonderful people who, the creators, the real creators, I mean, us actors, we're the last thing that goes into the mix. These guys, as you've heard tonight, all the marvelous, well, they're pioneers, these fellas. You're not going to see many of them like this again. They're still here with us, but they are pioneers. And there's so many stories from TRON. But for us actors, it was wearing tights, hockey helmet, motocross shoulder pads, foam arm guards, knee-high boots, and the first male thong. Of course, Cindy Morgan didn't have to worry about that, but Jeff and I both had to do that, and I think Jeff saved his. I did not. Anyway, it was a marvelous experience. Working with Steven was amazing because I always felt here was the guy that had all of this in his head. He could see this movie that I was still trying to see while making it, if you know what I mean, trying to visualize this. And, you know, without the storyboards and these things, it just felt, it was exciting. It was exciting to be in something that, are we really sure we know what we're doing here or where we're going with this? I think it was that kind of pioneering effort where is this going to work? Is this going to come off? And I know these guys had the confidence in it, but you know, I'd come from television and pretty much that is done the way it's always been done. Of course, I think TRON even changed that up now too. And we have a show called TRON Uprising, I might add. It's doing well, real well. And so TRON continues to live. So I'm not going to say much more, only that I want to bring Stephen Lisberger up here. Stephen, come on up. I just want to say, Stephen.
I want a mic that you haven't breathed on.
Thank you. This one is right now. No, I just want to say real quick, and then I'm going to get off it. This is the man whose vision this was, and here we are 30 years later. I think it's quite amazing to be associated with something that has lived this long in the memories of people, certainly all of you here. So this is the guy, everyone else too, but it was up here. And what a thrill it was when we were doing TRON Legacy to sit with him again. And it was my joy. It's my joy to see it in his eyes as we were watching some of the young actors that we were screen testing, remember, for the role. That we would tell a few stories back and forth, but I can see in his eyes this has been quite a trip for him. So.
Well, after all these years, Bruce, you make us all look bad.
Thank you. I try. Anyway, Stephen, take it away.
Feel better.
Okay. I'll see you all later.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I'll try to speak quickly. I want to start by thanking Donald and Alwyn for making this happen and the TRON team. And what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about my perspective of TRON and computers. I might refer to some notes for that. And then tell you a hopefully amusing story, which I think is appropriate for here and this evening. So I'd like to start by saying I miss Mobius. It saddens me that he's not out there making art. He told me when he was at Burbank, he visited Burbank, and I was lucky enough to see him one more time. And he said TRON was the only movie he ever worked on where he was treated like family. And I thought, what were these other productions thinking? I mean, how many Mobiuses do you get to hang out with in your life? Very strange. I also want to give a shout out to a person who was a very humble artist but super talented, who was with TRON from the beginning, and when, you know, his name is not up there enough, and it's John Norton. I can remember vividly the day John had just finished working on his light box and his desk, all of which was made out of scrounged material from the building they were wrecking next door, and I had built the table and the light box. And he drew the first Video Warrior, and I thought, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So that was back in Boston, and those were some amazing moments. I also want to give I can't say enough about this person, but the other person who was there from the beginning is Peggy. And, you know, when the reviews were good or the reviews were bad, when the grosses were 5 million or 50 million, the one person who never wavered, was Peggy, so. All right, time for glasses. And by the way, Peggy's my attorney. So the thing is, when we made TRON, it was a different, and I'll use the analogy of seasons, it was a different time. There was a feeling that there was a frontier, something new was happening. It was like you could plant seeds, things could grow that had never happened before. And that time passed. Computers were an unknown entity, and pretty much other than Alan Kay's office. And I was glad that we were going to get to explore it as artists before anybody else. That was really cool. What happened is that the frontier gives way to a time when the next generation tries to civilize the frontier. And that's the time of sequels and remakes. And I say, bless their hearts. That's what I say. They worked their butts off on Tron Legacy. They gave it everything they had. And they're the ones that got it made. And it was a phenomenal effort on their part. So when you think about where we are now, you know, Google has mapped the whole planet digitally, and I can't remember a time when the human race has been more lost. So what happens is, after a while, when the systems are refined enough, you start to wonder, are we using this technology to reach the best in ourselves? And that's what the question was when I was working on Tron. You know, is the technology going to bring out what is the best in us or not? And once the technology matures, it starts to get too big to fail. And we start locking into programs, like Jerome Lanier says. And I wonder if after you go through the spring phase, and then you go into the harvesting phase, and then before the new spring, there's a phase in the middle. It's called the fall. And there's nothing wrong with these phases, and there's nothing wrong with the fall. But, you know, things start to rot in the fall. And I think we have to be careful that if we're going to get to the new beginning, that I was at a screening of Tron with Roger Ebert, a 70mm print of the picture was running. Roger Ebert has his Ebert Fest. He thinks 70 mil is overlooked, so he likes to feature it. And they had gotten a print from Disney, and we're in the University of Illinois at Urbana, and there's an old theater there, a huge movie palace, not as nice as this one by a long shot. It's called the Virginia, but it's gigantic. It seats 1,800 people. So I'm not going to introduce the film. I'm sitting in the back with Roger Ebert, and the theater was packed. They turned people away. And the picture runs, and I couldn't believe it. The print is so awful. It looks like you've got pomegranate juice in your eyes. It's deep maroon, and it's way too dark. And Roger says, no one will notice, and I'm really upset. But you know, the audience doesn't seem to mind, and we're an hour into the movie, and then the sixth reel comes up, and it gets way worse. I mean, it gets dark, like 5 stops dark, completely magenta, no colors left. I can't take it. So I get up. Roger Ebert says, where are you going? I said, I'll be back. And I try to find my way to the projection booth, where I end up in the upstairs balcony in this old theater, and I find a door in the wall. And I open the wall, the picture's running behind me, open this door, and I see this old rickety staircase that goes up, I don't know how far. And I thought, well, here goes. And I step in, and the door slams behind me. It is completely pitch black, not one speck of light, all right? And I thought, well, I have to keep going. So I started trying to go up these old rickety wooden steps. And I got up about 5 steps, and I fell right down on my hands and knees. And I could feel the dust was about 1/4 of an inch thick. And it's pitch black, and I'm crawling on my hands and knees. And in the background, I hear Flynn in the recognizer in the bit, yes, no, yes, no. And I can't turn around because it's worse to try to go down the steps on your hands and knees. And there's 1,800 people behind me watching this movie. So I'm crawling through the darkness, and I finally get to the top of what seemed like 2 flights of steps, and there's a door. and it's completely sealed off. There's no light coming from underneath it. And I find the doorknob, I open the doorknob, and there's a hall, long hall, and at the end I can see a sliver of light underneath another door. I run down that hall, and I get into the projection booth, and these two old-time projectionists look at me like, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, you gotta turn up the lamps. So I go in and they say, well, you know, this is a Disney print and you could destroy it. I said, I plan on destroying it, don't worry. And so I turn up the arc lamp 3 stops, and yeah, Reel 6 now looks at least watchable. You can at least standing there, and I'm saying, 30 minutes ago, I was crawling on my hands and knees through the darkness and filth. And no one knows that even happened, and now I'm here, and you know, this is definitely a major high point in my life. And I thought, you know, I gotta tell that story because that's a good analogy of what making Tron was like. So anyway, I will wrap this up. I will say, just so picture it's 1981, as all these guys have said, you know, you don't have a computer, you've never touched a keyboard, there's no internet, you don't have an iPhone, you know, all this doesn't exist. It's easy if you try to imagine it. And then your friend comes up to you and says, well, it's 1982 actually, and says, you know, let's go see this movie called Tron. It's a Disney film. I hear it's really far out. And, you know, you maybe say, it's a Disney film. Okay, it's 1982, remember? And Disney doesn't make far out films. And your friend says, well, they used to. And so maybe you went. But anyway, here it is. Remember your users.